Welcome to the Business as Mission podcast, dedicated to those who long to see God glorified in business and the nations reached for Christ. Your host is Mike Baer, longtime BAM leader and founder of Third Path Initiative, an online education resource for starting and growing BAM businesses around the world.
Welcome to another episode of the Business as Mission podcast. I've got a returning guest, one of my dear friends, brother in the Lord, Bob Bush with IBEC Ventures. Those of you who have not heard the previous podcast with Bob on it, I am going to ask him to give us a little bit of his background and what IBEC Ventures is. So welcome, Bob. But once we start, we're really going to talk about a recent trip we took together to South Asia and some of the things we saw God do there. So Bob, just say hi to everybody and give us a quick background on you and IBEC Ventures so they'll know kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, Mike, it's so good to be with you again. And I'm probably like a lot of the folks out there right now listening to this podcast. I was in the business world for close to 30 years. In the life sciences was really my focus. And then God got a hold of me and introduced me to Business as Mission. And I realized that there was an opportunity to use my gifts for the kingdom. And so I guess that's a little plug for, just anybody out there who kind of feels like they're on the sidelines and they want to get involved. I mean, IBEC Ventures may be a great on-ramp for them. You can check out ibecventures.com. And basically what we do is coaching and consulting in tough areas of the world, try to help both startup and existing businesses build their businesses for the kingdom. And so that's a little bit about what we do. We've got about 35 to 40 coaches, men and women who love business and love Jesus. So, but yeah, it's been a life-changing opportunity for me to really now focus my effort on building God's kingdom and building these businesses the right way.
So Bob and I got connected, gosh, how long ago was it, Bob? It was in Minneapolis at the original, I think, the original BAM conference back then, and we started floating out the idea of working together. Yeah. And so today, just a quick commercial for what we do together, along with Dick Widener and a couple other folks, we've got an organization known as TriVenture, which is made up of a training company, Third Path Initiative. There's the coaching, which is IBEC Ventures, and the link will be in the show notes for those of you who want to go check it out. And then the third is a capital fund that we've been able to put together in order to basically teach people how to start a Christian kingdom-focused business, particularly internationally, coach them, get them ready to pitch, and then actually a place to go pitch where if it's a good business, they can get funded. So it's kind of, Bob, you call it the BAM launch pad, and that's kind of what it's become. So I like that. I like that term. So sometime last year, maybe the last couple of years, Bob, you had an investor willing to fund a BAM conference in South Asia, in India, and it took how many years to even get that off the ground?
Yeah, it took a couple years. I mean, there were a lot of moving parts, I think, and we'll talk a little bit about the outcome, and you can see why, because it was just an amazing, what God did. So I think the enemy was kind of getting in the way there as well. But yeah, it was a long time coming, but certainly worth it. Yeah.
So we finally got to do it. We went over really a couple of months ago. We chose a brutally hot time of the year to go. Yeah. But we went over together and we had a great time. And I'm just going to let you tell the story. But it was an incredibly great meeting. It was not a huge meeting. Probably it's the first of its kind in that city. But it was really visited by God, I thought. And I know you and I came away blessed, encouraged, really excited about what God was doing in that part of the world through BAM. So just kind of walk us through it. What are the big pieces? How did we get there? What was your thought coming in versus what actually happened while we were together there?
Yeah, Mike, I think about just the way it started out. I mean, it's a long way, right? In fact, you and I met in the middle. You went east and I went west. And one of the legs of my flight, one of my flights was 17 hours, Well, on a 17-hour flight, you got a lot to think about, right? I mean, there's a lot of things that go through your mind, but I do remember sitting there saying to myself and just praying that the next week when I was flying back the other way on the same flight, now going east rather than west, I just wanted to be closer to God. I just felt like, Lord, I have no idea what we're walking into, but I just want to be closer to you. I just want to go and glorify your name and just be touched by the people. And I knew I was going to be touched by them, and then hopefully be able to give something in return. And I can tell you, when I flew back, I remembered that conversation I had with God, and I had so much gratitude, for what he had done, because as you mentioned at the beginning, it's not an easy thing to do. But, the people there, they touched my heart. They touched my heart. I mean, their tears will be forever etched in my mind and in my soul. I just think I can still see the faces of the people that were there. And I was really the one that was blessed. But I think it's a perfect example of going to a tough place, following the Lord's lead. Because you and I talked a lot about, before we got on the plane, and you got blocked. You couldn't even get on your first flight and had to drive to to the next location. So there were a lot of moving parts, and we talked about how difficult it was going to be. But I think it was just a perfect example to me that when you listen to God, you follow his lead. And, sometimes that means you got to go to some tough places. The blessings are just, enormous. I mean, it's amazing the way that he used us to go there and then just be part of something really special,
I remember that first night, and you're right, by the way, the travel was tough getting there. The airline called me or texted me about an hour before my flight was supposed to leave and canceled.
Yeah.
So I had to drop to Atlanta just to, pick up the next leg. But and you had troubles going as well. You thought you were going to miss your flight, I think, in San Francisco, and it just, it was just kind of crazy. But I'm like you, the more opposition, I was asking, Lord, make this clear. Is this you getting in our way? Because sometimes he'll do that. Or is it the enemy? And of course, it was clearly the enemy, because once we got there, the blessing really was amazing. I think about the first night, Thursday night, and we were supposed to have an investors meeting to talk about the need for Christian investors in that part of the world. How many people do we have? 8?
Yeah.
9? Yeah, I mean, it was and none of them were investors.
Yeah.
It was and we both thought, this is going to be a total dud of a meeting, because it was just everything up to that point had kind of gone wrong. And then the next morning, boy, did God change our perspective.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I was just thinking as we were, preparing for having this conversation about just all the things that God did, I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, he created just a tremendous opportunity for networking for people that were there. I mean, most of the people that were there, Mike, they had never been to a conference like this, right? I mean, this was the first one of its kind. It was the first one. This is the first one that's ever been done in the southern part of that country. So many of them there had never even been exposed to this. And I think, providing hope and encouragement for these practitioners running their businesses, and then giving them the realization that they're not alone. A lot of the things that they're going through, so many others are going through the same thing. And we say it all the time. I mean, one of the things that's so critical in business's mission is not to do this alone, right? I mean, it's hard to do it when you have a lot of support and you've got people coming alongside you and praying for you and, bringing different gifts to the equation. It's tough enough when you've got all those things working in your favor. But trying to do this alone, and I just say that, just throw this out to anybody who's listening today. If you've got a business, if you're thinking about starting a business, we'd love to work with you. Try IBEC Ventures. But if you don't work with us, work with somebody, because it's just really, really hard to do this by yourself,
Yeah, it's interesting. You and I both had one of the same memory of that watching the participants. I mean, they were really kind to us, and we did a couple of keynote presentations, but there were other speakers. Yeah. We weren't the show. It was produced by an organization in India, an Indian organization, Indian business that's focused on business's mission. So it was really a truly indigenous, national sort of thing. And we were guests and treated with just great love and respect. But watching the people talking with each other, they hadn't met, they didn't know each other, but they were so quickly attracted. And I agree with you. entrepreneurs in general, I spend a lot of time working with entrepreneurs in general, need community. Well, businesses, mission entrepreneurs desperately need community. And I'm really excited about what we saw happen in that city. I mean, it's a very large city. I mean, it's a very, very huge city, but it's exciting to see this BAM community beginning to create itself.
Oh, yeah.
God's bringing, dozens of people together to form this sense of who we are, and we do this together. So they're not alone. But I agree with you. I think, Bob, this whole idea of some Lone Rangers out there maybe they can make it, but you need people to walk with you. You need people to love on you, to pray with you. And seeing that happen, seeing that community, that ecosystem actually starting up there is just so encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the other thing that you and I talk a lot about too is just, the unreached, difficult areas of the world, right? I mean, sometimes they're forgotten because they're really tough. I mean, and it's tough to get investment into these areas. It's just hard to get any kind of resources in there. But, talking with some of these folks there, I mean, what really stood out to me was the impact of a newly created job. I mean, we talk about that all the time, but, I think on average, I mean, we're looking at, 7 to 12 individuals on average are impacted by one job, because so many of these households are multi-generational. The businesses that we've met with, Mike, I mean, think about that one. I remember there was kind of a break in the action, so to speak. And one of the guys that was moderating said, I'd like to give people in the audience an opportunity to pray. And you and I happened to be asked to come up and usually when that happens, and there were a couple of others as well, there's maybe one or two people that come up and you pray for them, And I remember looking up and seeing this line of people that were waiting for each of us. And I think I just said to myself, Lord Jesus, I'm not equipped to do this with you. I could just feel these line, not just a line forming, but just heartfelt emotion, just building up in these lines. And at that moment, I mean, I just felt the Holy Spirit come over me. I'm sure you felt the same thing, but we didn't know these people, started praying with them. A lot of tears, just kind of bearing their soul. And just, I think for all of us that are in a position to help people, most of these folks, all they want is someone to listen, someone that's going to provide hope and encouragement, someone that's going to help them. And at that moment, I felt such this incredible connection with them. I just felt like not only do these businesses need and want help, but they also want to have the opportunity to build, and you mentioned it earlier, these local ecosystems, this foundation where they can build from within. We don't want to come in and try to do this from the outside. We just want to support them. But I do think that was one of the things the conference did, is it created a catalyst, and a kind of the inertia maybe that they were looking for to kind of, they had built a foundation, but really to kind of show them that they're not alone in doing this.
Yeah, they've definitely got momentum now. It's funny, you and I have the same memories, and part of it's because we've talked so many times about the trip, and it was really special. But that time when, like say, you're used to one or two people maybe coming up for prayer. This was virtually everybody in the room, and this went on for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe. It was incredible, and knowing that God was meeting them, right, being there. And the tears, the smiles, the openness, and then just the power of praying with them, just sometimes over big things and sometimes over what we would think of as kind of trivial, but still that's what was on their heart, and they wanted to be prayed for. It's funny, I've been to two conferences this year where the same thing happened. That was one of them in India, and the other was in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. The spontaneous coming forward to be prayed. The one in Brazil, so many people came forward. I had to ask somebody that was not even with me to get up and help.
Yeah,
it was just too much. But that's not just emotional. That's spiritual, and it tells you there's something happening there. So Bob, who stands out in your memory as one of the folks you got to spend time with? I'm thinking, for example, Don. But who stands out and really God used to touch you?
Well, the story that I've been thinking about ever since it was shared, kind of just to create kind of a picture of this for the audience. You and I were on a judges panel, and there were 6 pitches that came through. And so basically these are quick pitches. They're folks that are trying to prepare themselves for getting in front of investors. And we were playing the role of the investors. And one of the guys that got up there did a really good pitch. But then we had an opportunity to ask questions. And the question that we asked was, tell us a story about somebody in your business that you created a job for, that you brought this individual in, and it changed their life. Just kind of give us a sneak peek of kind of what goes on behind the tent, so to speak. And I don't know if there was a dry eye in the place, because first of all, the guy that shared this he told a little bit about his story. And this is a guy that never saw television until he was the age of 18. He grew up in a very abusive household. Just, if he was late coming in from doing the chores, he was beaten, just time and time again. But when he got out of high school, he went on to accept Christ and went to seminary. He went on to bring his mother, his father, his grandmother in her deathbed, and his 5 siblings to Christ. He started 2 businesses. And then he shares this story about this young man who he created this job for, who came in. He was telling us, Mike, that this is the young guy. He was at work every day, earlier than everyone else he worked, and he stayed later, and he just, every box was checked and then some, Well, when COVID hit, they went through a difficult time, and this young man wasn't working there for a while, but he decided he was going to go to college, actually over in Europe, and came and asked for a reference letter. So this guy wrote him a really nice reference letter, told him a little bit about him. Well, anyway, he went on to get this position in this university. He got accepted. His whole family went over. And it was just the sequence of events that here's this young man who came in at ground level. He was given this job. He exceeded in this job. And then the Lord really blessed him for his hard work and perseverance. But when this guy was sharing this story with the audience, he could barely get through the story. He was in tears. That's the thing. So I think of that story and just other examples of how a newly created job can in many ways be the first step to salvation. It just has a significant domino effect, and we can never lose sight of that.
We'll be right back after a short break. Third Path Initiative is your go-to site for accessible, affordable BAM training. Learn about the biblical foundations for business as mission, ethical capitalism, BAM strategies, and how to become a kingdom employee. It's all at thirdpathinitiative.com.
I've been in the employment industry for 30 years and still consult with it. With that industry, but one of the things I discovered early on, just in general, is the impact that you can have on somebody's life when you help them get a job, whether it's a temporary job or a permanent placement job, whatever. And we actually began to use as our motto, changing lives one job at a time, because we saw the impact. Not everybody's life was changed, and not everybody came and told you the difference you made. Once in a while, someone would come back and tell you their story, like Don did. That this job has changed my life. And so I always think of it as, we're not really changing lives. We're giving them a chance. We're giving them an at-bat.
Yeah.
And then lots of good things can happen. And particularly in the world of BAM. My focus and your focus has really always been among the unreached and the least reached. And not that I'm against marketplace ministry in the U.S. I'm not. You're not either. We believe in it. But we're both focused on, and our organization, TriVenture, is focused on the hard-to-get-to places where a job is not just a career change, it is a life change. And then when it's done in a kingdom way, as I say, many, many people we've seen come to Christ through employment. And it's just a powerful, powerful thing. So another guy I'm thinking about, you remember who I talked about, is the lawyer from up north. Yeah. And I don't know if our listeners are aware of what's going on in India right now, but officially, the government denies that there is any organized persecution of Christians, but realistically, it is happening, and particularly in the northern part of the country. So pray for our brothers and sisters there. I mean, their houses are being burned down, churches are being physically torn down, people are being beaten, pastors are being put in prison, and this young man is amazing. I mean, has the face of a boy. He literally looked like he's about 20 years old. But he is a pastor, and his ministry has been getting these men and women out of prison, and I've yet to get him to tell me, is he sneaking them out, breaking them out? Is this the Scarlet Pimpernel of India? I don't know, but it was a delightful guy. And then on top of that, he goes and gets his law degree, so he can actually defend them in court. And so this guy's got this heart to do this, and he's paying for all this himself from his own business. And just when he would smile, smiles that light up a room. This guy had a smile that would light up a room, and he was one of my great memories of the trip as well. And he's invited me, and I think you too, to come up, visit him in the north, and help him get some pastors out of prison. So I'm just thinking, we're going to have to put on our fatigues or our Navy SEAL outfits. I don't know what he has in mind, but so Bob, when you come away from a place like India, I'm going to say this for the sake of those who don't know you. I had never actually heard Bob do a stand-up presentation, and I've known him for over a decade. I've heard you speak online, but never heard you saw you stand up. Your engagement with the people was absolutely miraculous. I mean, you're a different person. I mean, you're a great guy. Don't misunderstand. You're one of my best friends. But watching you engage and speak from your heart, and watching them respond to you, was just a powerful thing. So something happens to you when you're there. What is it that happens to you?
Oh man, well, thank you, Mike. That's really kind of you. I feel like when I get to these places, I think there's maybe four things that are really important for me. It's first of all, I want to meet the people. I want to hear their stories. I want to be a good listener. I think that's the first thing. The second is, and I got to pray about this because it's all the Holy Spirit, is you want to connect with them. You really want to not only be a good listener, but then also let them know that you really care. I mean, and you can tell when somebody really cares. And I think that's the second thing. I think you want to tell them you love them, that you're there for them, but you really love them as brothers and sisters of Christ. And man, at the end of the day, you want to help them, and I think that a place like this, where we came back from, for me, it re-energized my batteries. I think, the Holy Spirit when I go into these areas, I know it's going to be tough. This one's a perfect example. Like you said at the beginning of this conversation, it took us 2 years to get it, nailed down and in place. And then you get there and you can see why, because this is where God wants us. And so I think for people out there, I feel like, the key takeaways for me is that love is really our universal language, no matter where you're at, no matter if I'm here in my community or if I'm, in a really tough area of the world. I think God wants us to go to these tough places. Doesn't mean we shouldn't go to the other areas that are a little bit, there's more of a foundation. We can go there as well, but let's not be afraid of the tough places, because when you get there, you realize that not a lot of people are doing this. And then really the last thing would be, again, for people that are out there that because it's so easy to think that there's not an on-ramp for you, that I'm not a pastor, I'm not a missionary. What am I going to do for the Lord? I don't really have any desire to go overseas. There's so much, with our technology now, there's so much access to these people. And I would just say that for me, when I get in there, I feel like, I've got some gifts that I think I can help people with. Like I say, about 95% of the blessing is coming my way if I can just give back a little. And that's, that conference, you and I said this after the conference, I don't know if we've ever left a conference. They're all really good, but I don't know if we've ever left a conference. So when we left that night, the last night, you and I were trying to get out the door at 10 o'clock that night. We couldn't even get out the door. Remember? It was like they were holding onto our, under our pant leg, not letting us get out. I mean, that's how in need they are. And so we got to, we cannot forget them. We've got to go in there and we've got to show them that we can help them,
Bob, as I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking again about our audience that listens to this podcast pretty regularly, there are some that would be great stand-up presenters. There are some that would be, business geniuses, but there are some that they just love the Lord and they're in business. Like most Americans, they have a kind of a head for business. And I would encourage anybody to, if you get a chance to go and be a part of one of these conferences, and I don't care who's putting it on, they're becoming much more normal. But if you get a chance to go to one in a hard place or a faraway place, take advantage of that opportunity, and don't think, what have I got to give? Because sometimes it might just be encouragement. Yeah, it might be a word of wisdom in the special moment when that person needed it. But you don't have to have super gifts. You don't have to have super corporate experience. You don't have to be a Superman or a Superwoman. You go and you love and you serve, and it really truly makes a difference. And I'm recruiting now. Okay, I'm absolutely recruiting. If you get a chance, I don't care who you go with or where you go, but if you get a chance to go overseas, not necessarily to start a business, but to go help a business, you bring so much to the table that will bless that person, help that person. But as Bob said, it's more blessed to give than receive, because the more you give, the more you receive.
Absolutely,
you'll come away changed. We were practically walking on air. Leaving. We were just energized and excited, and the movement is still going on. So that's incredibly exciting. I'm going to make another recruiting pitch. IBEC Ventures is a coaching company. Their coaches are volunteers, business people from all over the world, primarily the U.S., but not only the U.S. If you have an interest in joining up, reach out to Bob or reach out to Jonathan Brake, their head coach, and just learn about it. It might be a chance for you. It's not like a full-time job. It might be a few hours a month. But you get a chance to come alongside a startup company and help them figure out their way and get started, and you walk with them. So again, am I recruiting? Heck yeah, I'm recruiting. I want to see everybody get out of the stands and get into the ball game, and join the movement wherever you are. So Bob, as we wrap up, I guess any just last minute words from you to the group, and anything that you picked up in India that you think is important. And by the way, he didn't pick up anything bad. He didn't pick up any diseases. It was a great trip. We were spoiled, to be honest with you. We were absolutely spoiled in every way. And I came back, other than just the long flights, we came back energized.
Absolutely.
So give us kind of a parting word or an admonition or.
The thing for me that I'm, because you play back a lot of these conversations of the people that you meet and these practitioners who are running these businesses. And I think the thing that really became apparent to me was these weren't just Christians running businesses and checking boxes and looking for people who were honest and people who showed up on time and people who worked hard and all the things that every business looks for, quite frankly. These were believers trying to make disciples in the workplace. And what we were there to do is to support them in that cause, because as you and I both know, Mike, it's a totally different mindset when you look at the business as the ministry. And, I talked to a number of people that these were, men and women who loved Jesus. They were starting these businesses and running these businesses for the right reason. And I believe that in many cases, it might be a little bit of capital. It might need to be a coach. It might just be someone to come alongside and have a monthly call with them just to encourage them and provide hope. But sometimes they get stuck. And if there's no one there to kind of get them out of that challenge that they're faced with, then, it can be discouraging and sometimes they quit. And so we've got to be there. We've got to be there with them. And because you get into these areas of the world and you just realize that God created all of us the same. We all want to do the same. We want to support our families. We want to do this the right way. And as believers, we want to run these businesses for Christ. And my encouragement to everyone out there is like Mike just said, get off the sidelines, get out of the stands, get out there, get a hold of us. We want to bring you in and help you get involved, because there's people out there who really need us.
That's a great place to end, Bob. You ready to go
Ready
back?
to go, yeah. Let's look at, we'll have to start booking flights here pretty soon if we're planning on going there in the next year or two,
I will tell you, I came away absolutely convinced that India is going to be hugely influential, not just impacted by business's mission, but they're going to be influential in the global movement. There's a warfare going on there, right? There's a spiritual warfare going on, and that tells you something. The enemy doesn't show up unless God's at work.
Yeah.
And so he showed up because God is at work.
Exactly.
And so I'm excited about what we're going to see out of it. So again, just to our listeners, Bob Bush, IBEC Ventures, that's IBEC, IBECVentures.com, and check it out. Get to know Bob, reach out, find out what's going on, get involved, and also check out TryVenture.com, which will give you kind of the bigger picture of what we're working on and helping people learn about, launch, and grow kingdom businesses around the world. So Bob, again, great to see you. Thanks for being with us, and come back soon.
Great to be here, Mike. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the Business as Mission podcast. We invite you to become part of the story by supporting the BAM podcast at patreon.com/BAM Stories. There's a link in the notes with this episode. For more information, go to thirdpathinitiative.com or tryventure.com. Please share this podcast and give us a review wherever you listen. If you'd like to help with expenses and expansion of the Business as Mission podcast, you can become a donor through Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/BAM Stories. This podcast is brought to you by generous donors and sponsors. You can become one by going to patreon.com/BAM Stories.